All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to our new episode, Function is Language. The dictionary definition of function reveals its dual nature, since function requires the concept of other. Insightful perception accesses possibility and infinity as wide open source, since it has no function requirement, but is idea, consciousness, or revelation. Educated belief hides the divine fact. Also, the awareness of the divine fact is the divine fact actualized. Those words describe the function of words as a human effort to obscure source as oneself. So human activity, the seen, heard, and felt belief system, is not causative. Mrs. Laird goes on to say, man, the conscious identity of being is forever being the everywhereness of mind in all beauty, form, outline, and color. See, every individual literally translates our conscious presence into a language comfortable to our current perception of living. This apparent action functions as your method of making sense out of our current perception of ourself and our world of experience. In other words, human beings function or make sense of our experience by assigning meaning to our perception. Each of us experience living within the parameters of our own limitations, and that involves the self-responsible cause-effect function seen as individual human living. So literally, each of us live our individual perception as the world we're walking through. Mrs. Laird wrote, the thing and the idea of it is one. And this one is an idea of mind. And Mrs. Eddy wrote, we must lay aside material consciousness and then we can perceive truth. So laying aside functions as allowing appearances to be as you live the facts of being just as you see them. So welcome, Betty. What would you like to add to that intro?
I don't think I have anything to add to it.
Well, what had you come up with this whole revelation of function as language?
Well, I guess it was a surprise to me in exploring that territory to discover that function is very much a language activity, that mind present is very direct. And when you explore a cause-effect thing or try to follow the lines that leads to something, you're dealing with language, with the way you perceive things.
Right.
And so it's very much a function of language. And that was just kind of a surprise. It's not a surprise when you think about it, but I'd never given it thought before.
Right. So having it be function is dual or calls up duality. What does that then open up as possibility with our study of science and all of that?
Well, all function is convenient or comfortable language. So it's just the way we have to see it at the moment. It is not the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
The way it is mind is all in all, period. That's it.
Right.
And that doesn't function to do anything. That constitutes everything that exists.
Right.
Function is doing something with it or channeling it a certain way or whatever.
Right. And that's all in the world of language.
That's right.
Not in the world of being.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
Although you really would have to say it's the way you see the world of being.
Right. Right. It's our point of view.
And it's different for each one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, clear. All right, let's dive in then. We're looking at Practice Not Profession, the pamphlet written by Margaret Laird. And on page 37, she wrote, mind and all they are literally the think of mind.
Yep. You know, we may and often do think that we are doing something.
Right.
But the language looking like that is actually the done, the accomplished, the existent, presence, self-revealing.
Right. Okay. And become conscious for a single moment that life and intelligence are purely spiritual, neither in nor of matter. And the body will then utter no complaints.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just being present to the facts, and things flow, things shift. Is that what that's saying?
Yes. You know, was it Thomas Merton that said the only presence that can acknowledge God is God?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that is true right down through anything you want to explore in metaphysics. So right now, we're talking about purely spiritual existence. The
Mm-hmm.
infinity of mind, consciously acknowledged, is all that's ever going on. And it is acknowledging itself.
Yeah.
Just as God is the only thing that can acknowledge God, we're still talking about this. The divine idea is the only thing that can acknowledge itself.
Yeah. Very good. Okay. And then in Science and Health on page 15, line 28, Mary Baker Eddy wrote, practice not profession, understanding not belief, gain the ear and right hand of omnipotence.
Yep. Yep.
So it's about being clear about source, being
Yes.
clear about what's causative,
Mm-hmm.
and not assigning cause to the picture.
Yeah, if you're accurate in your perception of language, then you won't ever make that assumption.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And trustworthiness is the foundation of enlightened faith.
Yeah, and the key word there is enlightened.
Say more.
Well, trustworthiness doesn't relate to the average definition of faith, but faith that is enlightened and seeing that that is the source and condition called mind being.
Mm-hmm.
Mind being itself being.
Mm-hmm.
It's well, the word I wanted to use has escaped me, but anyway, that is a practice that moves you away from the reliance on language,
Mm-hmm.
the recognition and acknowledgement of what's actually having it look that way.
Right. Right. Okay. And then in your book, Mind is the Athlete, on page 76, you wrote, the universe as we know it is actually the descriptive language of human experience, acknowledging a non-visible source.
Yep.
And that's the descriptive language of human experience, my point of view of the one reality present, viewed the only way that I can view it. Is that what that's talking about?
Pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, we live the world as we are, not
Right.
as it is. So you have to be clear about your self-identification.
Mm-hmm.
If you think of yourself as Betty, that's a whole different story.
Right.
Then to recognize that there isn't anything called Betty without a divine fact present.
Right.
And the divine fact present has that occur.
Right. So be present to the divine fact, the source of what source of him.
Then you're not making excuses for yourself, and you're not bothered with this thing of trying to impress somebody with who you think you are. If you're present to the fact, it's evident, period. That is the life you're living. If you're trying to put it over as something esoteric or a far out idea to make impressions on people, you'll lose the whole battle.
Right. I got it. Okay. Very good. Now, if any of you out there have any thoughts or comments or questions, please write them into the comments box. We will get back to you if you're not live at the time, but if you are live, we'll bring them right up and we'll discuss them. So feel free to do that as we go through. So so just do that. We'd welcome the participation also. Okay. In Practice Not Profession on page 36, Margaret wrote, mind comprehends itself.
Yeah. You know, it's self-evident if you live that all is infinite mind.
Mm-hmm.
Then what comprehends that is mind itself.
Right.
Yeah.
But still, our experience of it, though, is our point of view.
The way it looks to you could be a point of view.
Right.
Experience should be solid.
Okay. All right. Okay. I got that. All right. And this comprehension or idea is something to be, not something to touch with the fingers or see with the eyes. So that's experience, something to be.
Mm-hmm.
That you just said. But it's not tangible.
Right. And, you know, it's difficult to get around this thing, the fact that understanding is not something we do. It isn't something we can accumulate. It isn't something that we can add to or lose. Understanding is constitutional. It's part of the establishment of being itself being. And so it's important that you don't struggle to understand. It's important that you be wide awake, alert, listening, observing whatever, and beginning to use some of these facts as a touchstone. Say, do I get that? All is infinite mind. Oh, the idea, something doing with the idea. Is that something I'm doing to myself here with figuring things out? Or am I understanding or being the understanding that what's going on is mind functioning?
Mm-hmm.
And if I mistake that view as if Betty could do something, I'm going to miss the boat entirely.
Right. Right. Okay. And Miscellaneous Writings, Mary Baker Eddy on page 179, line 28, wrote, we must lay aside material consciousness and then we can perceive truth.
Yeah.
Isn't that making two of things? We got to do this in order to get that. I mean, isn't that?
Well, she wasn't writing to Christian Scientists, you remember.
I know. I'm just asking.
Yeah, her language suggests that, but actually it is a function of being itself.
Right. It's just acknowledge being, period.
Yeah, and what can acknowledge God but God? What can acknowledge truth but truth?
Yeah.
What can acknowledge being but being?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. This requires conscious awareness, which is mind action, not human efforting, since appearances are merely points of view.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. All right. And in your book, Mind is the Athlete, on page 77, you wrote, who you are being is the cause and condition of your language world. Say more about that.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting statement because the fact is that every moment you are generating your next moment. And if your focus is one of concern or trying to manage, organize, change, fix, heal, all of that, you have one view that'll come to identify yourself with. But if you are present to the fact of being, that all is infinite mind, regardless of how it looks, which means it's infinite love, it's infinite truth, it's infinite principle.
Mm-hmm.
It's constituting all there is to you.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to go outside of the being that you are ever to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
All, A-L-L, all is infinite mind, infinitely manifest. So what I have going on is infinitely manifest as mind present.
Mm-hmm.
And how I see it is how I play the game with it.
Right.
I see it accurately. Life has one look. If I think it's something I can manipulate and organize and fix and so on, it'll have a different look.
Right.
And I live it one way or the other, but I'm always on the path to self-discovering.
Yeah.
I'm on the path to seeing what it actually is.
Well, it's all self-discovering. Like everything that comes up, everything that I have going on, all of that is my own self-discovering, seeing infinity the only way that I can see it for whatever there is to discover. Would that be a good statement?
Yeah, and when you use the word infinity, you leave everything wide open, because infinity never duplicates and it never stops.
Right.
And it's forever, unceasing, present.
Yeah. Okay.
And when you release the sense of yourself as a two-legged animal, you have that whole infinite realm as your home base.
Right.
You know, if you see the fundamental or foundation point for being, it would have to be all consciousness, it would have to be love present, would have to be perfection functioning.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Now, in Practice Not Profession on page 38, Margaret Laird wrote, take away so-called mortal mind and matter appearances can take no cognizance of matter. I'm not sure I follow that. So mortal mind doesn't exist, does it?
Well, mortal mind is a belief that that the language can think.
Right here.
If that's where you have the belief going on.
Well, it's the look, right?
The belief that Betty can figure it out.
Yeah.
The belief that Betty can do something about it,
right,
or with it, or for it, or to it.
Exactly.
You know, all of that is, it's really a misplaced source.
Yeah.
Because the efforting the human being does is not sourcing anything but the human being's confusion.
Right. Okay. All right. Very good. And Mary Baker Eddy says this in Science and Health on page 479, matter cannot see, feel, hear, taste, nor smell. So matter has none of that in it. So what is that? What is doing the seeing, feeling, hearing, tasting, and smelling is mind, soul, spirit, principle.
Yeah. So what does the note say following that?
It says matter is not self-cognizant, which we already said, the other thing. And all action is being.
Good. God action is man.
Right. Okay.
So all action is manifestation.
Right. Yeah. Okay. And then in your book on page 78, you wrote the perfection present as divine being addresses.
You skipped a thing. Back up a little bit. Living scientifically.
The perfection present as divine being addresses. I only have this that I copied. So the perfection present as divine being addresses the unique strengths and weaknesses appearing as useful human footsteps.
Yeah, that was the sentence that I wrote. But in my book, it says living scientifically, you will find the answer before there's a problem.
Yeah. Right.
That fits.
Yes. All right. So how do you want to wrap this one up? If anyone has any questions, anything you want to, anything, otherwise this is clear as mud, I know. But if you have any questions about this, please type them into the comments. Now, what do you want to say to wrap up this particular subject, really looking at function is language?
Well, yes, because we're dealing all the time, 24/7. As two-legged animals, we're dealing with language. We're generating the language that best explains to ourselves what we've got going on.
Yeah.
What is this? You know, and the thing is, You will always have language is changing all the time. You will always have language. Now, how it shapes up and what it has to say to you or show you or disclose to you or reveal, however you want to say that,
Yeah.
Is determined by where you're standing,
Right.
by what your perception allows you to see.
Yes.
So when it says all is infinite mind, I can stop all efforting, because trying to have Betty figure it out and the efforting involved is nothing to do with mind.
Right.
It's the effort to have the language do something for me,
Right.
or with me, or as me. But when I understand that the divine being, the God idea, mind, life, love, truth, that idea, those ideas, present, being themselves being, are all that's ever possible.
Mm-hmm.
And they're complete and whole and functioning perfectly right now. So we're always coming from the done into seeing what it looks like to us.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it is infinity present. It is divine love manifest. It is infinite truth showing up every minute of every day.
Mm-hmm.
My ability, shall I put it that way, maybe, but anyway, my view from the science standpoint gives me a great deal more freedom than my view as Betty tried to figure it out.
Right. Right.
Yep.
Okay. Well, that's all we have prepared for today. So we're going to end a little bit early, but we will be back here next week on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Central. So please put that in your calendar. And then we'll see you next week. All right. Take care, y'all.